Action! Action!
Ladies and gentlemen, we've discussed
Ready? Action!
so far we've discussed that was one of those Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and our dear viewers. Our episode for tonight deals with broken promises and betrayal of trust. One of the most important quality of a leader is integrity. Integrity, in plain and simple words, is what you say is what you do. Public office is public trust, and we elect our public officials based on the trust that we give to them, which is in turn based on their campaign promises. Tonight we will discuss, explore, and analyze whether our recently elected government officials display this quality of integrity. Welcome to our show, Topics. With me is Mr. Nicky Gokwan, President of the Philippine Media Association, and I am Hermo Pagtakan, your humble servant. Nicky, I'm bothered by this, and I'd like to discuss this with you. We have elected a government recently based on its campaign promises. Can you tell us, give us an idea what are some of those campaign promises that our elected officials did?
Well, prior to the Alberta provincial elections, Conservative Party leader Jason Kenney has promised to maintain healthcare spending. There were a lot of rumors that he was going to cut healthcare spending,
Yes.
as well as educational spending. Now, to counter this, prior to the provincial election, Jason Kenney called the media and announced that he was promising not to cut or maintain or increase healthcare spending. But
Recent events.
In the recent 2019 Alberta budget, that's not the case.
What did he announce, Nicky? What did he announce the budget?
So the recent budget showed a lot of cuts in healthcare, affecting healthcare workers. So we're talking about frontline workers here, nurses, and other healthcare workers with a 2 to 5% cut. So 2 to 5%, let's put that
In perspective.
In perspective, 100,000, that's $5,000 a year.
Wow. Okay.
If you have that much cuts going through because of the deficit that we have, we could understand you saying maintain spending and not increasing wages for the nurses and for the healthcare workers, because there's no money. The government doesn't have money. Finance Minister Travis Toes said that we don't have what do you call this, a revenue problem.
Mm-hmm.
We have a spending problem. And when you say spending problem, he wants to the government wants to be more efficient,
Yeah.
right?
Cost cutting, in other words.
So when you cut frontline workers, this means, in layman's language, you're gonna see very few nurses. Okay.
So does that mean layoffs? Layoffs?
Well, not generally. They're not gonna get the usual hours they're gonna get. If you have 2 to 5% cuts in wage, that's a big impact to
Hiring.
to the nurses.
Nurses, yeah.
Now, one of the biggest problems that Alberta has seen, they say, is that nurses has very high overtime filed for the government.
They're saying overworked and underpaid.
recommended a long time ago to increase the number of nurses, but the government hasn't done that yet.
Yes.
Right? Because of that, nurses are working overtime, and in fact, a lot of nurses are working overtime but not getting paid overtime.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not only nurses that will be affected, as you mentioned, even in the education sector, the teachers themselves, right?
Yes, so let's talk about the education cuts. Part of the education cut here is you're looking at one of the biggest thing is University of Alberta. University of Alberta now has 44, if I'm not mistaken, the exact figure would be 40 million, around $40 million dollar cut. And because of that, the president of the University of Alberta is stepping aside. He believes it's going to be
Negatively affecting.
negatively affecting the operation.
Yeah. Now, folks, let us look at what Kenny promised while he was campaigning before the elections.
More and more. I've signed a public health guarantee that we will maintain or increase funding in a publicly insured, universally accessible system. We're going to invest $140 million additionally to deal with the mental health and opioid addiction crisis. And we want a health system that puts patients first, get the administrative waste out of AHS, and push that money to our nurses and doctors.
So, President Nikki, those are what he promised while he was campaigning before the elections. Now, let's look at what he did, or what he's doing now that after he got elected.
Here at home, hundreds of Alberta public sector workers are staging a protest not far from the annual meeting of Alberta's United Conservative Party. The rally, all in response to a warning from the provincial government. It says that thousands of jobs could be at risk of being cut from the public sector, many of them from Alberta Health Services, and the cuts would include hundreds of frontline nurses. The warning came in a letter to unions from the youth.
Jason Kenney did not fulfill his promise to maintain healthcare spending as well as education spending. And
Why do you say that?
well, when you say maintain spending, you don't cut wages. I understand Alberta has a big deficit right now, and there are other ways to catch up with what we're doing. If Finance Minister Travis Toast says we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem, then we have to be careful and take a closer look at what we're spending.
Yes. And what about in the education sector? That the same is happening, right?
Yes, for students right now who have student loans, it's sad to hear that now student loans have gone up by 1%, and for students that's a lot of that's a big one.
Are there any other sectors that are being affected, President Nikki?
Yes, actually there are a lot of sectors that have been affected in the public sector, especially, even in emergency response call centers.
Yes.
The budget to put up a new emergency center has been shelved by the provincial government.
Again, what's the justification of Premier Kenny in doing this budget cuts?
Well, Alberta has had a spending problem long before the NDP government even came into play. So the spending problem did not start from the NDP government. It started way before the NDP government of Rachel Notley. And we need to understand how this has caused all the problem that we have today. And it was started by the Conservative government because the Conservatives ruled Alberta for 40 years.
Now, if Kenny's motivation is good, then I would go along with it, right? Same with you?
Yes, definitely. This is not about all these things are not about Jason Kenney himself. This is about the actions that has been taken. When you're a public official, you have to be accountable to everything you say and everything you do.
That is integrity, precisely what I said. And integrity is what you say is what you do. Now let's examine whether Jason Kenney was true to his campaign promises. In our next episode, we will discuss whether Jason Kenney, by his words and actions, display the important public official quality of integrity. So far, we've discussed what were those campaign promises made by Premier Kenney before the election. We've also discussed what he did after he got elected, and that is the announced budget cuts. And he gave that as justification to reduce public spending in the province of Alberta. In our next episode, we will examine and discuss whether the other actions by Premier Kenney are consistent with his given justification or reason for the budget cuts. See you then.